Hi, today I wanted to talk to you about priming canvases. I've got a canvas here today which I've just unwrapped. Out of interest, it's a 60 by 60 Winsor & Newton professional deep edged canvas. It's a little bit rough to the touch, and so what I'm going to do now is prime it with some gesso. So gesso is a white acrylic primer. This will already have gesso on it, giving it this white finish. But they're normally very thin layers, and some canvases that you buy will have hardly any on. It'll just be a couple of very thin layers, and they'll feel quite scratchy to the touch. For some artists, that doesn't matter, particularly those that are maybe using thick impasto paint, that sort of thing. It won't matter to them at all. But for artists that paint in thin layers, and artists that really don't like that sort of scratchy feel, priming with an extra few coats of gesso really does help improve the quality of the finish on the surface. So what I do is I use Liquitex professional gesso. It's a I quite like this. It gives a decent finish, and it is quite runny, so that helps in terms of moving the paint around. You can use any gesso, but sometimes it comes quite thick, in which case you might need to thin it with water. Even with this, I will still have a little bit of water in a tray handy, so that if it does start to dry quickly or it thickens up a bit, I can just keep it moving by dipping the brush into a little bit of water. So I've already prepared the gesso there in a tray, and I will start working with that soon. I can't leave it too long because it will start to dry up. But rather than you watch me cover the whole canvas in paint, I'll just talk through a couple of the other considerations. So once you've coated it with the thin layer of gesso, it will be touch dry fairly quickly, but you need to kind of let it dry out fully overnight. And then once you've done that, I sand with one of these sort of fine sandpaper. It's just a little flexible block. You can buy them fairly cheaply, and I'll just give it a light sand outside normally, because you don't want too much dust in the studio. Wipe it off, come back in, and then I'll do a second layer, and depending on how it's going, I might even do a third layer, so that I end up with a really lovely surface to paint on. And that's how I prepare the canvas. In subsequent videos, I'll talk about how I draw up and how I tint the canvas depending on the predominant colours of the work that I'm going to try and create. So that's preparing the canvas. I'll start putting it on as I say cheerio to you. So if you have any questions, points, you disagree with me, as ever, please drop me a message. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear your views. Thanks very much. Cheers.